The heat wasn't just hot. It was a physical weight, pressing the air out of Isabella's lungs. The sleek luxury SUV sat dead in the red dust, a useless piece of metal in the middle of nowhere. Her water bottle was empty. The silence of the canyon was terrifying. She had started walking an hour ago, but now the horizon was spinning. Her knees hit the dirt. She closed her eyes, waiting for the end. That's when she felt the vibration in the ground, not an engine hooves. She looked up through the shimmering heat haze and saw a silhouette against the blinding sun. A man on a horse, looking down at her like Judgment Day itself. Isabella Sterling checked her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. The digital numbers blinked back at her, mocking her schedule. She was already 2 hours behind. In Chicago, 2 hours meant a missed flight, a lost client, a disaster. Here, in the vast, empty expanse of the Texas Panhandle, 2 hours just meant the sun had moved a few inches across a sky so blue it looked painted. Isabella gripped the steering wheel of the rental SUV. Her knuckles were white. She wasn't used to this. She was used to the grid system, 2 paved roads, 2 streetlights, and Starbucks on every corner. She was an architect, a woman who imposed order on chaos. But here, chaos was winning. She had been sent by her firm to scout a location for the Oasis, a proposed ultra-luxury resort and spa. Her boss, Mr. Sterling, who also happened to be her father, had given her a simple directive. Find the most beautiful, untouched land in Texas, buy it, and pave it. Isabella had spotted a location on the satellite maps. A rugged canyon area, miles from the nearest town. It looked perfect on a screen. In reality, it was a furnace. The dashboard thermometer read 104 degrees. Dust, red and fine as talcum powder, coated the windshield. She reached for the dial to turn up the air conditioning, needing that blast of artificial cold to calm her nerves. But the moment her fingers touched the dial, the car shuddered. A violent cough came from the engine, then silence. The hum of the AC died instantly, the power steering locked up. Isabella wrestled the heavy vehicle to the side of the dirt track, the tires crunching over dry sagebrush. "No, no, no," she whispered, turning the key. The engine clicked. Once, twice, then nothing. She grabbed her phone. Searching for service. She held it up to the windshield, waving it around as if altitude would help. Nothing. Isabella opened the door and stepped out. The heat hit her like a physical blow. It was dry, aggressive, and smelled of baked earth and pine resin. She popped the hood, staring at the engine as if her glare could fix it. She knew nothing about cars. She knew about load-bearing walls and cantilevered balconies, not alternators and radiators. She looked around. To her left, a red rock canyon wall rose hundreds of feet into the air. To her right, endless scrubland stretching to the horizon. She was alone. Totally, completely alone. She got back in the car, but within 10 minutes, the interior became an oven. She had one small bottle of water. She drank half of it in one gulp before stopping herself. Panic, cold and sharp, began to rise in her chest, warring with the heat. She waited an hour. No cars passed. Why would they? This was a private access road she had arguably trespassed on to get a better view. "I can't just sit here," she said to the empty car. She grabbed her purse, her phone, and the half-empty water bottle. She started walking back the way she came. Her heels, sensible for a site visit but useless for hiking, sank into the sand.
Fabulous.
The sun beat down on her bare shoulders. 20 minutes in, her mouth was dry. 40 minutes in, her head was pounding. The landscape began to blur. The red rocks seemed to be vibrating. She stumbled, her ankle twisting on a loose stone. Isabella fell hard, the breath knocked out of her. She tried to push herself up, but her arms felt like lead. She lay there, cheek pressed against the hot dirt. The silence was absolute. No sirens, no traffic, just the wind hissing through the dry grass. She closed her eyes. So this is it, she thought, a strange calm washing over her. This is how the deal falls through. Then she heard it, a rhythmic thudding. Dull, but getting louder. It wasn't a car. The cadence was living. Thump thump. Thump thump. Isabella forced her eyes open. Through the shimmering heat waves, a shadow emerged. It was tall, dark, a horse. And on its back, a figure that looked like it had been carved out of the canyon rock itself. Colton West pulled on the reins, bringing his stallion Rusty to a halt. He adjusted the brim of his hat, narrowing his eyes against the glare. He had seen the glint of sunlight on metal from the ridge 3 miles back. He knew every truck in this county, and he didn't recognize that glint. Tourists, or worse, developers. He had ridden down to investigate, annoyed that his fence checking was interrupted. But he hadn't expected to find a woman lying face down in the dirt. Colton swung his leg over the saddle and dropped to the ground, his boots kicking up a small cloud of dust. He moved with the efficiency of a man who wasted no motion. He knelt beside her. She was dressed all wrong. A silk blouse, black slacks, shoes that looked like torture devices. "City, ma'am?" he said, his voice rough from disuse. He touched her shoulder. She flinched, letting out a small moan. "Water," she whispered. Colton unhooked the canteen from his belt. He carefully lifted her head. Her skin was flushed, hot to the touch. Heat exhaustion, maybe heat stroke, if he didn't act fast. "Slow," he commanded gently, tipping the canteen to her lips. She tried to gulp it, but he pulled it back. "I said slow. You'll make yourself sick." Isabella blinked, her vision clearing enough to see a square jaw covered in a few days of stubble and eyes the color of polished flint. "Who? ... Why?" Tree croaked. "That doesn't matter right now," Colton said. He capped the canteen. "Can you stand?" She tried, but her legs were jelly. Colton didn't ask again. He simply scooped her up. She felt incredibly light, fragile against his chest. He carried her to Rusty. "Easy, boy," he murmured to the horse.
Oh.
He lifted her into the saddle, then swung up behind her. His arms went around her to hold the reins, effectively boxing her in. Isabella leaned back against his chest. He smelled like leather, sweat, and horses. It was the most grounding scent she had ever known. "Where are we going?" she mumbled, her head lolling. "My place," Colton said. "It's closer than town. You wouldn't make it to town." The ride was slow. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long purple shadows across the canyon floor. Isabella floated in and out of consciousness. She felt the heat of his body radiating against her back. She felt the steady rhythm of the horse. For the first time in years, her mind wasn't racing with blueprints and deadlines. It was blank, quiet. Colton looked down at the woman in his arms. She was trouble. He could feel it in his gut. Women like this didn't come to the panhandle for the scenery. They came to change things. But right now she was just a life that needed saving, and that was something Colton understood. They crested a ridge, and the ranch came into view. It wasn't a grand estate like the ones in the movies. It was a working ranch. A modest, single-story house made of timber and stone, with a wraparound porch that had seen better days. A barn that leaned slightly to the left, corrals made of rough-hewn logs. But it was solid. It had stood here for 80 years, resisting tornadoes and droughts. Colton guided the horse to the front steps. He slid off first, then reached up to help her down. Her legs held her this time, barely. "Inside," he said, guiding her through the front door. The house was cool, dark, and quiet. He led her to the oversized leather couch in the living room and helped her sit. "Stay," he ordered. He went to the kitchen and returned with a wet rag and a glass of electrolyte water. "Put this on your neck," he said, handing her the rag. Isabella obeyed. The cold water was a shock, but a welcome one. Looked around the room. It was masculine and sparse. No art on the walls, just a few old black and white photos of cowboys. A stone fireplace that took up one whole wall, and books. Stacks of books on the floor, on the tables. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger now. I think I would have died out there." Colton stood by the fireplace, leaning his arm against the mantel, looked her up and down, his expression unreadable. "You might have," he said bluntly. "What were you thinking, driving a car like that onto a cattle trail in July?" Isabella stiffened. The gratitude was replaced by a defensive instinct. The map said it was a road. "The map is wrong," Colton said, "and common sense should have told you to turn around when the pavement ended." "I have a job to do," Isabella snapped, then regretted it as her head spun. "Well," Colton said, pushing off the mantel, "your job is going to have to wait. I checked your car on the way past. Radiator is blown, tires are shot, and the nearest mechanic is in Amarillo. I can't get him out here until Tuesday." "Tuesday?" Isabella gasped. "That's 3 days away. I've a flight on Monday." Colton shrugged. "Not anymore, you don't. First night was difficult." Isabella slept in the guest room, which was clearly Colton's childhood room. There were old rodeo ribbons on the wall and a dusty guitar in the corner. She tossed and turned, the silence of the country keeping her awake more than the traffic of Chicago ever did. But by morning, the fever from the heat had broken. She woke up to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. She wandered into the kitchen, wearing the only thing she had, her wrinkled silk blouse and slacks. Colton was at the stove. He was wearing a clean flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle. He didn't look around. "Coffee's in the pot. Mugs are in the cupboard above the sink." Isabella poured herself a cup. It was strong, bitter. "Hungry?" he asked. "Yes," she admitted. He slid a plate of eggs and bacon onto the wooden table. They ate in silence for a few minutes. "I need to use your phone," Isabella said. "I need to call a tow truck. Maybe a helicopter." Colton almost smiled. Landlines down. "Storm last week took out the wire down the canyon. I use a radio for emergencies, but unless you're bleeding out, the sheriff isn't going to fly a chopper out here." "You're not trapped," Colton corrected. "You're a guest. There's a difference." He stood up and put his hat on. "I've got work to do. Make yourself at home. Just don't go past the fence line." "Wait," Isabella said. "What am I supposed to do all day?" Colton paused at the door. "Rest. Look at the view. Or you can help." Isabella chose to help. Not because she wanted to work, but because she couldn't sit still. She followed him out to the barn. The heat was already building, but the morning air had a sweetness to it. Colton was saddling Rusty and a second horse, a gentle mare named Bess. "I need to check the south water tanks," he said. "You can ride Bess. She's basically a sofa." Isabella hadn't been on a horse since summer camp when she was 10, but she wasn't going to let him see her fear. She climbed on. They rode for hours. At first, Isabella was tense, gripping the reins. But slowly, the rhythm of the land took over. She watched Colton. She watched how he scanned the horizon, how he noticed things she didn't: 2 broken wire, a limping calf, a hawk circling overhead. He didn't fight the land, he moved with it. They stopped at a windmill that was pumping water into a metal tank. Colton dismounted and checked the gears. Isabella got down and walked to the edge of the canyon. The view was breathtaking. Layers of red, orange, and purple rock stretching out forever. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Colton came up beside her, wiping grease from his hands on a rag. "It is," he said softly. "My father, ... Isabella started, then stopped. "My father would look at this and see a golf course." Colton stiffened. He looked at her sharply. "Is that why you're here? To build a golf course?" Isabella looked at him. She couldn't lie. "Not out here." The landscape demanded truth. "A resort," she said. "The oasis. High-end. Exclusive." Colton let out a harsh laugh. Water is scarce as gold out here, and you want to build swimming pools. Right. It brings jobs, Isabella argued, sounding like a brochure. It brings money to the community. It brings noise, Colton countered. It brings traffic. He gestured to the silence around them. This ranch has been in my family for 4 generations, Colton said, his voice low. I've had developers knocking on my door for years, chased them all off with a shotgun. Isabella felt a chill. Are you going to chase me off? Colton looked at her. His eyes softened slightly. Not while your car is broken. The tension remained, but something had shifted. Over the next 2 days, a routine formed. Colton worked. Isabella watched and sometimes helped. She learned to feed the chickens. She learned how to brush the horses down after a ride. She learned that silence wasn't empty. It was full of peace. On the second evening, they sat on the porch as the sun went down. The sky turned a violent shade of violet and orange. Colton was whittling a piece of cedar wood. Isabella was holding a glass of iced tea, her legs tucked under her. I don't miss it, she said suddenly. Miss what? The noise? The emails. The constant pressure to be better, faster, higher. Colton stopped whittling. City steals your soul if you let it, he said. Out here, you can't hide from yourself. That's why people get scared of the quiet. He looked at her. You're not scared anymore? No, Isabella said. I'm not. Their eyes met. The air between them felt charged, electric, like the sky before a summer storm. Colton leaned in slightly. Isabella's breath hitched. He reached out, his rough hand brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline. Bella, he whispered. It was the first time he had used her nickname. He leaned closer. Isabella closed her eyes, waiting for the kiss. But then, the sound of an engine broke the silence. Dust rose in the distance. A tow truck, and behind it, a black sedan. The spell was broken. Colton pulled back, his face closing off like a shutter. Looks like your ride is here, he said, his voice cold again. The mechanic hopped out of the tow truck. From the black sedan stepped a man in a suit. Kevin, her father's assistant. Isabella, Kevin shouted, rushing up the porch steps, wiping dust from his shiny shoes. Thank God. We've been tracking your car's GPS signal, but it went dark. We thought you were dead. Isabella stood up. She felt disoriented. The arrival of the city people felt like an invasion. I'm fine, Kevin, she said. Mr. West took care of me. Kevin glanced at Colton with a sneer. Right, well, we need to go. Your father is furious. The investors are waiting for the report. Isabella looked at Colton. He had retreated to the far end of the porch, leaning against a post, his hat pulled low. He looked like a stranger again. Colton, she said, stepping toward him. You should go, he said, not looking at her. You've got a life to get back to, resorts to build. It's not like that. She pleaded, isn't it? He looked at her then, and the hurt in his eyes was almost unbearable. You're a tourist, Bella. You came, you saw, you got a nice story to tell your friends at brunch. But you don't belong here. The words stung. Is that what you think? That's what I know, he said. Go on. Get out of here before the dark catches you. Kevin grabbed her arm. Come on, Isabella. The car is loaded. Isabella let herself be led away. She sat in the back of the black sedan. As they drove down the long dirt driveway, she turned to look back. Colton was still standing on the porch, a solitary figure against the vast, darkening sky. She watched until the dust swallowed him up. Chicago was loud. It was the first thing Isabella noticed. It was a constant, grinding roar. She sat in her corner office on the 40th floor. The view was spectacular Lake Michigan, the skyline, but it felt flat. 2 weeks had passed. She had pitched the project. Investors loved it. The oasis at Palo Duro had the renderings up on the board. glass structures jutting out of the red rocks, infinity pools draining the local aquifer. It's going to be a masterpiece, Isabella, her father said. He clapped her on the shoulder. And the best part? We found out who owns the prime parcel. Some cowboy named West. He's broke. He'll sell for pennies. Isabella felt sick. She looked at the rendering. She didn't see a masterpiece. She saw a scar. She saw the destruction of the silence she had come to love. She saw Colton's face when he talked about his grandfather building the barn. She went home to her modern, minimalist apartment. She turned off the lights. She tried to sleep, but she couldn't hear the wind. She couldn't smell the sage. She felt empty, hollowed out. She had everything she had ever worked for, the promotion, the money, the prestige, and it meant absolutely nothing. She walked to her window and looked down at the tiny cars below. "You're a tourist," Colton had said. "No," she whispered to the glass. "I'm not." The next morning, Isabella walked into the boardroom. The investors were seated. "Gentlemen," she said, "I have an update on the Texas project." She pressed a button on her laptop. The screen went black. "We're not building it." Her father stood up. "Isabella, have you lost your mind?" "No," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I've found it, that land. It's not meant for us. It's not meant to be tamed. If we build there, we destroy the very thing that makes it special." "You're fired," her father shouted. "I know," Isabella smiled. It was a genuine smile. "I quit." She walked out of the room, leaving her laptop, her phone, and her career on the mahogany table. The truck was a used Ford F-150. It wasn't pretty, but it ran strong. Isabella drove down the familiar dirt road. It had been 3 weeks. The heat was still intense, but now she welcomed it. She rolled the windows down, letting the dust coat the dashboard. She reached the gate of the West Ranch. It was open. She drove up to the house. Rusty was in the corral, but the porch was empty. Isabella's heart hammered in her chest. What if he had sold? What if he had left? She got out of the truck. She was wearing jeans and boots she had bought at a feed store in Amarillo. "Colton," she called out. Silence. Then a creak from the barn door. Colton stepped out. He looked tired, thinner. He held a pair of wire cutters in his hand. He stopped dead when he saw her. He looked at the truck, then at her boots, then at her face. "You forgot something?" he asked, his voice guarded. Isabella shook her head. "No, I realized I left everything here." She walked toward him. "I quit, Colton. Stop the project. They might try to find other land, but they won't touch yours. I made sure of it." Colton dropped the wire cutters. They landed in the dirt with a dull thud. "You quit your job? Your life?" "That wasn't my life," Isabella said, stopping just a foot away from him. "That was just ... waiting for this." Colton stared at her, searching her eyes for any sign of deception. He saw only the reflection of the Texas sky. "You know," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "it's hard work out here. The winters are cold. The summers are hell. There's no Starbucks." Isabella smiled. "I make pretty good coffee, and I'm a fast learner." Colton didn't say another word. He closed the distance between them. His hands framed her face, his thumbs brushing away the dust on her cheeks. "Welcome home, Bella," he whispered, and then he kissed her. It was a kiss that tasted of heat and dust and forever. Above them, a hawk cried out, circling the vast open sky. They stood there as the sun began to set, casting the canyon in gold. She wasn't a city girl anymore, and he wasn't alone.